work that you're doing in your communities, in your individual capacities, in your organizations, and we are really, really grateful. As Jared has mentioned, my name is Salima Joki Masharia. I work here at Inuka, Kenya, implementing the Wellness Resource Hub program, and we have our partners here from Uganda and also Tanzania. Welcome and thank you even for the continued support and partnership. And also, we are also very grateful to Jessica Horn and the team from Ford Foundation for the support they've given us to be able to implement this Wellness Resource Hub. I think having said that, let me just give a brief background of the Wellness Resource program and its genesis. I think the people in our generation, maybe in the 90s, who are there as activists, as defenders, could attest to us having a narrative that it is okay to be hard on ourselves, to be tough as we were defending and protecting rights. And the narrative was we don't need to rest because we are defenders. And it took a toll on most of us. Some of us, we lost other comrades on the way. Others also got maladaptive behaviors that could not be helped or assisted. So it's a combination of so many things. And here we are today talking about wellness and well-being. And the people who know me and the people maybe who get to know me is taking care of self is at the heartbeat of me, of Salima. Uh, if anything, and I keep telling people, my legacy is just for people to remember to taking care of self as we are also promoting and defending rights. And we acknowledge the many challenges that activists, defenders go through, manner of attacks through maybe social media platforms, physical assaults, physical attacks, media trolls, and all this. And all these have a bearing on our well-being. And that's why we are here today to witness the launch of a report that helped us just to go into in depth, just to understand what are the wellness needs, challenges that our civic actors in the region are experiencing. Because we also want our interventions just to be informed by a study. And I know and I acknowledge that we have so many players in this field, and we acknowledge. And my call as early as now is let's look at the recommendations level. What are these opportunities that have been availed to us that we can collaborate and partner in, because it is about complementing each other. I think having said that, allow me just to say that the focus for us as a wellness resource hub for 2024, also as we continue with our interventions and the things, the activities that we've done since the inception of this wellness program. So our key focus for 2024, number one, is also to document and recognize the role played by various unsung and underrated heroines and heroines of the justice and liberation movements in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. So we want to at least acknowledge these women who are the frontline championing for the rights of their children, of their families member, and their countries at large. So that is a focus for us as the Wellness Resource Hub for 2024. Our other focus also is just creation of a wellness hubs and community of practice, and also develop what we call screening tools, which can be accessed to all of us as civic actors, just acknowledging sometimes the challenges that comes with sending people to facilities, the costs associated, the sustainability mechanism. So we are encouraging a community of practice where we start this discussion from the lowest level, and we inculcate a culture of where you and I, with the skills that we shall offer through the awareness and sensitization program, you can be able to have be able to identify the telltale signs, maybe when someone is coming down with maybe mental illness issues. So we want to calculate that and just to change the approach from here to down there. The other intervention that we are thinking about and focus for us for this year is also to develop a common East African standards guidelines for wellness, so that at least we have we anchor our activities into some agreed formula. Because again, as I said, we acknowledge that people are doing wellness in the best way they know how. But how about having a synthesized, standardized document where all of us as civic actors in these different countries, we can also anchor our work into, and also develop and roll out country-specific wellness literacy curriculum and awareness campaigns focusing on the three priority wellness areas. And I think this will come when our consultants are sharing their findings, because of the priority areas that our civic actors spoke to were three. The one issues on their mental, their social, and financial literacy. And we know and we're cognizant that other partners, other stakeholders also have expertise, maybe in the financial. Then how do we together look at the priorities area and meet the gap that uh, was identified in their research. So allow me at this juncture, and I know we'll have discussions as we proceed, just allow me at this juncture just to give that opening remarks of why Wellness Resource Hub and the direction that we are taking in 2024, and just call all of us as partners, as stakeholders in our small and big ways, individually and collectively, to look at the recommendations and the findings that our very able consultants took time into just putting together, and see where we can pull together. Because indeed, as maybe Salima or Inuka, we cannot. But I know when we as partners just say on this recommendation, then this is the available opportunity, and this where we can partner together. So that is the direction for us in 2024. And thank you so much for just agreeing to be part of this discussion today. I think with that, allow me to invite Kawive Wambua, our Deputy Executive Director, to give also his remarks, and also focusing on what at the Weaving Resilience we are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Salima, for that introduction. Friends and colleagues, let me briefly talk about the Weaving Resilience initiative. The Weaving Resilience initiative is a global initiative of which was convened by Ford Foundation, but to all organizations in the global south, basically saying how do we change the narrative from uh, how do we change the narrative? I'm sorry, my voice is low. Is it better now? How do we change the narrative from the north, the north to south, kind of relationship, but now have south-south relationship where organizations are able to come together under what Ford Foundation identified as three thematic areas: institutional resilience. Institutional resilience is one of the pillars. The second one is strategic relevance. How do we strategically become relevant as organizations? And the third is holistic well-being. So those are the three thematic pillars of the uh, Weaving Resilience initiative. Under those pillars, under those pillars, there are hubs that have been established in the region, and we'll ask members of these hubs if they are here, maybe to say something at the end. The pillars, at least the ones in East Africa, are four. One is the pillar of financial resilience. This pillar is led by KCDF in Kenya and Civic in Uganda. And another organization in Tanzania. The Protection Hub is the second one. The Protection Hub is led by Defenders, and Defenders has got partner organizations in the three countries who are working on the protection hub. And the third is the wellness hub, which is hosted by Inuka. And we work with the Legal and Human Rights Center in Tanzania and the Uganda National NGO Forum in Uganda. The fourth is the Digital Resilience Hub, which is hosted by the FICTANet in Kenya. And all these hubs are working together to say, how do we enhance the sustainability, the well-being, the relevance, and the resilience of organizations, civil society organizations in the East African region, and for that matter, as a representative for the global South. Allow me at this juncture to ask our partners in Tanzania and Uganda to introduce themselves. I would like to call on Fulgence Masawe, the Director of Advocacy and Reforms at the Legal and Human Rights Center in Tanzania. Fulgence, karibu to say one or two things. Fulgence, unmute yourself. Okay, it seems that not able to talk. Sarah Pakuto from the Uganda National NGO Forum.
Thank you, Kawive. Good morning to everyone. Greetings wherever you've joined in from. My name is Pachito Sarah. I work at the Uganda National NGO Forum, and I'm the team leader for civil society strengthening here at the forum. Yeah, why we are happy to be part of this. NGO Forum believes in a number of things, one of which is partnerships, SG17. We believe that our work can only be done with people, and so when this opportunity came up, this is something that we could not be a part of. And so this is part of why we are on this with you. The other thing is that at the forum, we believe the citizen is central. And so anything to do with citizens or people, whatever it means, whether it is their health, their wealth, the economy, as long as it impacts citizens, NGO Forum is interested in that. And more importantly, we are a platform for NGOs in the country. And when we try to locate ourselves in this conversation of resilience, of wellness, protection, financial, and all that, it's incumbent upon us as a membership organization of over 700 members to pay attention to the things that make our partners, our citizens, and our people flourish. And so locating ourselves in this work was key for us. Being a part of it and leading this work in Uganda is something that we hold dear. So it is actually of great pleasure and honor to us to be able to do this and add this to the repertoire of services we give to not only our members, but our country at large. And we want to thank again Ford Foundation for their patronage. We want to thank Inuka for their partnership and for all the other participating organizations. And of course, to society organizations that we work with provide us a chance to do the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I don't know whether Fulgence has joined.
Monica Wive. It's unfortunate
Monica,
that I was in the part of the panelists who can speak. I could hear you, but I couldn't join because I was part of the audience.
Welcome.
First of all, thank you everyone for inviting me to join this gathering this morning. The topic the matter which we are handling right now is a matter which is very sensitive, which is like something which has been left out for quite some times. And in our engagement with Inuka and other stakeholders from the time we met in Uganda, we came to realize how important this wellness and some other program is important. LHRC is a human rights organization based in Tanzania, and our main focus to advocate for the human rights. And apart from that, we also do human rights defenders to some extent. But we have come to realize that we have been so forefront in defending some others' rights, but we have forgotten the civic actors. So our engagement in this program has been very instrumental, and it has helped us to be able to identify civil activists in Tanzania who some are still active, other veterans, other thinkers and supporters. But we have tried to identify factors which are affecting them in terms of stress, burnout, and psychological stress. And after life engagement, how these people they survive after retiring from what they do. But we have looked at how we engage these civil activists to address their willingness and some other problems. And this is not a hypothetical issue, it's the issue which exists in all 360 way of life of every activist who has retired from practice or who are still very active. These are the left out people who have devoted their life to save the life of the other people, but at the end of the day, they become the victim of their own work. Others will be left out completely, others will be excommunicated by the family because of the nature of the doing, and others are still doing the same work, but they still face challenges. So to us, this is a very good opportunity. And when it was introduced in terms of the fact finding and introducing the program, some of the civic actors who we managed to engage, we could see how this program is needed and how much they're expecting to hear from us what next from where we started to engage them and how they can be supported so they can put their life. So without further ado, let me end up here and give opportunity for others so that we can hear from for those who have been in the field to share their report and see what will from here from today's discussion. Thank you, Kawive.
Thank you.
The rest.
Thank you, Fulgen. Thank you, Fulgen Masawe, for that kind introduction. I will hand over back to the MC for that to take us to the substantive section or session of this meeting. Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Kawive, for the session. And this is time for Salima to then invite the consultants from the three different countries to give us the findings from each. Kindly, Salima.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, the speakers that have spoken before me. We are humbled. Allow me to introduce our consultants who undertook this very noble survey just to help us understand the gaps therein with our civic actors and maybe even challenges on the service provision. So allow me to call upon Dr. Geoffrey Chambua from Gisaka Consulting Company from Tanzania, just to share with us their findings from Tanzania. Dr. Geoffrey Chambua, if you're here. Okay, as we wait for Dr. Geoffrey Chambua, allow me to call Sarah from Uganda, and then we'll have, after Sarah, then we'll have Dr. Patrick Motahi, the researcher from Kenya. But in the meantime, I'll be trying to get Dr. Geoffrey Chambua. Sarah, please, if you could take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Salima, and greetings again to everyone. I'm not able to share my screen. I don't know if this can be worked on. However, oh yeah, now I can. I think we're all together. Everyone can see my screen, correct?
Yes, we can see your screen. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, I am not the consultant. Our consultant, called Gloria Tibakunira, was not available. She works for Milele Solutions Limited, and so I have taken the presentation in her stead. I hope I do it justice. I'm here to present the report of the country-specific baseline on wellness in Uganda. And as you can see, we carried out this baseline on 5 areas: health wellness, physical wellness, mental wellness, financial wellness, and social wellness. In this presentation, I will go through who we are again, for those who may have joined late, the objectives of the study, as simply as I can, and then the considerations and the participants when we're doing this study. I'll also discuss, we'll present to you the internal environment, which is peculiar to the NGOs, the external environment, and then the wellness providers. These 3 sections is where we centered our study. And then I will move to the so what, which is in terms of recommendations. The NGO Bureau, the NGO Forum, not the Bureau. We always confuse with the NGO Bureau, which is a government entity. But the NGO Forum, we like to describe ourselves as the NGO blueprint, meaning that we work every day to try to come up with best practice, to be a good example of what an NGO should be like. So all things compliance, governance, now wellness, but anything that makes an organization run well, that makes an organization be the ideal that others can build on. That is what we pride ourselves on being. We are sharing a reflection platform for NGOs in the country. Our work is around contributing to governance and development processes. We also work to enhance the operating environment of these organizations. And like I said before, we have over 700 members working across the country. Quickly to the study. We had 5 objectives, whichever way you want to look at them, but one was that we wanted to understand the wellness needs of NGOs. It's one thing to say, oh, wellness, but it's another to understand what organizations actually need. We also wanted to understand the industry, the framework and the providers and the regulators in Uganda, because again, as law-abiding entities, we would want something that would not get us into trouble, quote unquote. But it was important to understand the industry, the framework, and the providers and regulators, or lack thereof. With this study, we also wanted to ascertain the level at which NGOs have involved themselves in wellness. What are they doing? How are they doing it? Are they doing it? The 4th was to be able to provide information from our study, find out what is happening and be able to provide it through this study. And I think finally was to have recommendations, for others to be able to navigate what is in the space. I mean, if an organization chooses that it wants to do wellness or it's willing to take on wellness, what recommendations could we make, what opportunities are there, and how can we do it in a systemic and sustainable way? When we did this study, we considered 3 things. Wellness providers, because it's one thing to ask for wellness, another to have people that can provide. So we wanted to understand as a baseline who are the wellness providers in the country. What do they provide? What is wellness to them? And what are their thoughts, on how they engage with NGOs or the sector itself? The other was external environment, which is really about the organizations that were participating, what it is that they do, what their thoughts are, what they have in place and what they don't. But then there was the internal environment, which is really specific to who leads the organization. What do they know? Does the leadership or the management understand wellness needs? Do they think it's important? And things like that. Now, because we're a membership organization, we focused this study on our members. And like I said, there are over 700 members under NGO Forum, but then we decided to take a small sample space and of our members. We also focused on the constituencies of district NGOs, national networks, faith-based organizations, district NGO networks, and international NGOs. So we made sure that the sample was representative of all these types of NGOs. We also looked at program focus areas and made sure that gender, youth, women, governance, livelihoods, we tried to make sure that the sample space was representative of all that. And we also considered region because of the differences in extreme regions in our country. We decided that this sample space should consider the regional balance. And so that is how we came up with participating organizations for this study. Internal environment, like I said, peculiar to the NGO, and I'll go quickly here. It was quite interesting to find that, and of course this is maybe popular culture or whatever, but the majority of respondents were male. And the majority of respondents were in positions of authority, putting forth the assumption that in cases where wellness should come up, they will be able to make decisions. It was also interesting that despite our choice of samples, these organizations were small. Typically, NGO-sized organizations were small, and so it brought forth a number of assumptions. One thing that we actually found quite recurrent is the risk, owing to the fact that small organizations have staff that have very high stress levels, not because the work is too much, but because they are, on many occasions, they are called upon to carry out different tasks that are beyond or above their own job descriptions. And even in the recent past, with all these challenges with fundraising, you found organizations having to take on more work to be able to raise more funds. And so we found that that was one big risk. The other thing is that the data showed us that indeed there is very little knowledge on wellness. A majority, when asked to share, the majority did not know much about wellness. We also asked about the wellness dimensions, and of all the wellness dimensions that you would think would be key for these respondents, especially in light of the fact that for Uganda, the government had said about 14 million, and released the report saying about 14 million people have mental health issues. You would think that mental health probably would be high on the agenda, but despite the averageness of the scoring, social wellness scored highly. And maybe one could think this is an offshoot from having been locked up and away from others during COVID, but that's something we found very interesting. Financial wellness, that one was the one considered most important, even if they were more conversant with social wellness. They thought that financial wellness is of best benefit to the employees, and not physical health, because one would argue you have to be healthy to be able to make the money or enjoy the money. However, the data shows us that the most important was actually financial wellness. We did not have much. Maybe mental wellness came in second, but health and physical was really trailing at 18%. And that, of course, was concern to us, because more and more we know that for civil society workers, the type of work we do, but the constant sitting, this all exposes us to health risks, but the data shows us otherwise. We went further to ask these organizations, what aspects of wellness do they have in their organizations? What does wellness look like? And these were the more common. Top of the list was medical cover insurance and health checkups. And yet again, this is interesting, because there's doing so much towards health, but it is not thought to be very important on the other hand. I guess maybe because there's a lot being done. But then, of course, yes, medical cover insurance, there was health checkups, there was also physical fitness exercises, and in some cases, the organizations that will provide aerobics once a week for their employees. There was also therapy in some cases, staff safeguarding, saving groups, again speaking to financial, the flexible work environment, informal gatherings at paid up meal times, financial literacy, team building. So it was quite a myriad, nothing really focused, but kind of like, I would call them one-offs that exist and can easily be put into place. And when you look at the current aspects of wellness on the screen, these are things that are quite easy relatively to put in place. You don't have to engage a lot. You do not have to put in a lot of money, but it has become the norm. So there were no really, apart from maybe the outlier like weekly devotions and counseling, this probably is because we included faith-based organizations in this study. But I mean, outliers from the norm were not many. External environment. It was quite clear on the whole that for Uganda, wellness is a new phenomenon. With all the wellness we know, the idea that there should be financial and the idea about mental wellness and all that, it's quite a new phenomenon because about 2/3 don't even know of any institutions or individuals who provide wellness programs. Now, if you ask an NGO staff, if of the sample size you find that 2/3 do not know anyone who can provide wellness, then it means that there is a challenge where wellness is concerned, because even if they did need advice or information or help, they would not know where to go. And more to compound this is that you would assume that organizations that are involved in social justice work, in human rights and livelihoods would know more about wellness, but this was not the case according to the data. Again, much of the information shared was that from the data that we collected is that most organizations weren't able to answer certain questions because, again, they did not know much about wellness. We also assume that because of the pandemic and all the push towards self-care and all this information going around, it would have, triggered some form of mass sensitization in organizations, but this wasn't the case according to the data. However, we did note high levels of willingness and goodwill to embrace and budget for wellness. Not knowing did not stop them. At least nobody said they're not interested in wellness. Everybody believes that wellness is important and this is something that they need to pay attention to. To therefore kind of round out the study, we decided to visit a number of wellness providers in Uganda. And again, the sample space wasn't very big because there are very few providing wellness in the holistic manner that we understand it to be. Through the data, we found out that common dimensions of wellness in Uganda include financial wellness, and this is what organizations, which institutions or service providers say they are providing. They had the financial, the social, the holistic, the health and physical, and the mental. Now, the interesting thing is that as much as they were providing wellness services in the country, these wellness providers would not give us an example of a framework or a player in government that supports the wellness agenda in Uganda. And of course, that's arguable. Those of us who are very good with wellness, like Salima might argue, and so by this is quite simple. This, it would be easy to identify. But then again, the data showed us that they could not suggest one framework or one player in government that speaks to this. Now, when you look at the common dimensions, when you look at these common dimensions of wellness providers in Uganda, and then you look at the actual packages and services that they provide, there seems to be some similarity with the slide on what wellness looks like for NGOs in the country. Financial wellness, the aerobics classes, the health risk assessment, workplace assessment, team building sessions. There were interesting ones like personality type testing, counseling services, gym membership. But again, when you look at the packages, they seem to be tailored to the needs or to the budgets, if I could be brave enough to say, of these NGOs. Wellness in its fullness was not fully covered. You see a bit of financial, you see a bit of health, you see just a bit of physical. But then when you talk about programs and ambassadors, then a little on mental health or support and psychosocial support. But this is what, in general, is provided for in terms of wellness by the providers in Uganda. So we asked the question again, and we asked this to the providers. You know wellness, you're doing wellness, this is your business. Why is it not a priority for NGOs? Why does it look the way it does? And the common answers were really what you see on the screen. Lack of qualified personnel in the organizations to be able to identify and say, look, this is what we need, this is what wellness looks like, this is what we should do. They also cited lack of commitment. This is on part of the management, but also of the staff and even the donors to say, look, wellness is important. Let us continue with it. Let us make sure it is followed, and we see to the well-being of our staff. Again, poor appreciation of wellness. Going by the data, people just think it's so, people only consider social and mental, and of course, more recently, self-care being important. But the appreciation of the benefits of wellness, not only to the individual, but long-term to the organization, on impact, on delivery, poor appreciation in general. Another issue was really the high costs. And indeed, for a sector that is struggling with funding over the last few years, when you have to choose between a wellness program and salaries or overhead costs and a wellness program, definitely these costs will be highly of issue. The other point was that the providers believe that NGOs treat wellness as tick the box, or you must have it. So they put in some semblance of wellness and just tick the box. So there is no drive to kind of fully, roll it out in its entirety. Another issue was really that about, and I guess this is the stigma that we have in our societies, as African societies, around mental wellness or having issues. We don't talk about our problems openly and not to the employer, unless it reflects negatively on you. So there was that issue as well. But then the priorities of donors and employers came into play. What is important for donors? And of course, mental well-being or general well-being was not one that they found really important. Lack of knowledge and poor understanding of wellness, again, this is demonstrated in the data about what wellness really is and the different aspects. And then, of course, the belief that staff medical cover is sufficient. The whole idea that you have medical, you can go to a doctor. If you have something bothering you, the doctors will figure out, kind of like distancing ourselves from the actual well-being issues beyond just giving the medical cover. So those were really the issues that were unearthed at that point. So what? And of course, for further details on this, you can actually access the full report. But we then asked, what then? We are calling as they're calling us the wellness hub for all this wellness work. We have to have wellness spaces, we have wellness groups, but then the data is giving us a picture that is a bit a mixed bag. And so we asked the question, so what? And the main or the general recommendations we would get for employee wellness in NGOs was really about sensitization. There needs to be more information because it's a relatively new phenomenon. There has to be more information for this to be taken up, for it to be understood. There has to be more information and relevant research on the benefits of employee wellness. Yes, we hear about it, but kind of to bring it home to our context and the type of work we do and to understand the benefits for the employer. So not only for the staff themselves, because the staff might understand that their wellness is important, but for the employer to connect the dots from employee wellness to delivery, to impact, to results. And so sensitization on all levels. The other recommendation was really about getting buy-in. It's one thing for staff, for everyone else, for partners to talk about it, but for the management, for the penultimate organs to be able to say, okay, wellness is important. That is a first step in getting wellness entrenched in these organizations. Donor support and funding. I don't know if I have seen in my 12 years of working for NGO Fund, if I've seen a budget that allows for wellness for not only for ourselves, but for our partners. And this is crucial because of the high cost related and the investment that is needed. The recommendation here is that donors must support and fund wellness because the work that donors are funding that want organizations to engage in is in its entirety what causes staff to be unwell. For example, organizations that are working in governance, if you have government going after a staff or an individual and his family, when they're arrested, when there are riots, all this is wellness, the traumas that are associated with it. So the recommendation really is that if donors are funding work that is potentially dangerous to the well-being of staff, then there should be some considerations made towards ensuring the wellness of the staff that are carrying out this work. Again, in terms of government and frameworks, there was a recommendation about a statutory requirement for wellness in workplaces in Uganda. Just like we're pushing for minimum wage, we're pushing for all these things for maternity and all that, but kind of get the idea that wellness must be made a requirement. And when then it's a requirement, it's very easy to amp it up in NGOs and organizations.
Sorry, Sarah. I hope it's winding up. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes, I am at the end of I'm at
Okay.
the end of it, of course, recommendations, I'm at the end of it. And then, of course, finally, an umbrella organization to support this, because we need more advocacy, we need more conversations, we need more discussions on this. And so to close, it's right. I know Sun Tzu tells us that in chaos lies opportunity. And in this chaos that is the baseline for Uganda, there's actually very huge opportunity to pick up these conversations on wellness. There are so many factors that have made this possible, beyond our own wanting to push the wellness agenda. But I mean, the pandemic, the continually shrinking space for civil society, all these and more provide the fertile ground for wellness in Uganda. And so it gives us a chance to weave wellness resilience in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I hope even as the participants, you've jotted questions, comments for Sarah that will inform the plenary discussion. At this juncture, allow me to invite Dr. Patrick Mutahi, the researcher who did the baseline survey in Kenya. Thank you. Mutahi, I don't think I can hear you.
Sorry. Yes, so I'm going to present on the baseline wellness survey for Kenya. So this baseline we did we surveyed individuals across several counties, and our focus was to look at how they understand issues of wellness, what are their vulnerabilities, how they deal with them. So we had we targeted to reach 180 respondents. We managed to reach 100. 84 of them were for the survey. And as you can see, we had more of the men at 56. And then we did targeted interviews, key format interviews on 20 of the respondents. And all these respondents came from the counties where Inuka is present and where it has been doing the work on wellness. And those are the times in October, 12 October last year to 1st of November when we did the survey. So this is representation of the counties. As you can see, most of them were from Nairobi, Kakamega, then Mombasa. Then we had a few from Garissa, and Nakuru, Tana River, so it's this from the counties where they came in. So what we are going to present is data from the views of these respondents from these particular counties. As we noticed is that the men were more than the women. So we had questions on demographics, and no one identified themselves as from the LGBT community. So everyone identified themselves because it was a self-identification question in terms of the gender. The age, most 38% were between 30 years and 40. And this also, I think the next slide we are going to see it's because of the kind of work where they are based and what they do. So you'll see most of the people are between 30 years and 40 years, that's 8%, followed by those who said they are over 51 years, then 41 and 50. Just few of them were below 30 years. So majority then definitely were over 30 years of age. Then definitely now corresponding to the area, as you can see most, because we wanted to know how much of their time have been involved in the civic work. And we had 43% of them who said they have worked between 5 to 10 years within either the human rights movement, the trade unions, the civic work in general. So that formed the bulk of the respondents in terms of the years in service. And definitely the ones who are over 50 years, most of them are these ones who had covered over 21 years within the civic work. Then, because here we are looking at individuals, we also wanted to know in terms of the engagements as in the civic work, how are they engaged? And most of our respondents were either associated, formally with a registered organization, that's at 73%, either as an NGO, university, a law firm. So there are all these different categories where they say that they work. But also we had almost an equal number of people who are informally, either they were in networks, informal networks, they were working either within the community, and here they identified that they work those informal groupings. At 42% were individuals who say they just work alone in the different categories of civic work, and also is to point out that here we are trying to tease from the different categories that Inuka has of the civil actors. What kind of work then do they do? Are they doing as activists, as supporters? Are they doing as thinkers? And that's why even we have like the 2% of the intellectuals. So here we are trying to tease out in which categories, different categories do they fall out? Do they fall in that? So we had, and I think this is just like one person who said he's a public officer. And that's why I could categorize that. So this is just a representation of the work they are doing, because again, also it impacts on issues of their wellness. So now to go to the findings, one of the things that we wanted to find out is how do they understand about wellness? And when we ask that question, is that there were very different things that they were talking about wellness. But what came to to the fore is that everyone was talking about a better state of mind. They were talking about also a better physical presence, the way they live physically in terms of their homes, issues of personal safety and the like. So when we ask the question about wellness, everyone is talking about safety, physical, mental, financially, and also a guarantee that that they are going to have meals like every day, or even take their children to school. And that's why then this question is then, how concerned are you about your mental and emotional well-being? Most of our respondents, as you can see, were saying they were very concerned. And this was driven, so when we asked further, then why are you concerned? They always went back to the basic needs, that I'm concerned because possibly I'm not able to fulfill my basic needs. I'm not able to take my children to school. I don't have a guarantee of an income. And there was a whole many reflections on the poor economy as it is, and inability to know if you're going to make it through the day or even through the year. So that's why most of the people here said they were concerned about their mental and emotional being. Then we wanted to ask them to test different issues on how they feel, and here these are things we felt that really fall on their mental and their mental well-being. As you can see, all of them had over 50%. That's half of the percentages. But most at 93, they were said they still had sadness and grief because either they had lost family members, they had lost co-workers, and they were still grieving on that. Again, followed by those who are saying that they experience a lot of anxiety and sleeplessness. Also, they were saying how they feel overwhelmed from urgent requests for help with no responses to respond. And for this one, when he asked them, do you refuse to take any urgent request? Let's say, for example, it's a call for action. And all of them were saying, no, they don't refuse. They always do that. So that means that they're still adding more of the stress and anxiety to themselves. We also wanted to test this question about how much support then do they also get from organizations. And they said that most of the organizations don't have backup in terms of mental health. And that also causes for them a lot of anxiety. So as you can see, our respondents that we reached out to, all of them have concerns about that they are not, that they have experienced different levels of anxiety, of mental disability, which then also obviously impacts on their overall well-being. Also, we wanted to test how much of the individuals has this changed, and this was for we had asked this question for the last 5 years. How have these aspects changed for you and your family? And if you look at the orange one, that has remained the same, is around 30, and that between 20 and 31%, and the one that worsened is the gray one. So you can see most of them at 39% are saying their personal physical safety has become worse. Managing their mental health and wellness, again at 36, so are saying it's it's become worse. But then if you can put that together with here where they are talking about that it's been the same, so those are quite high percentages, because if it's remained the same and it's not getting any better and getting worse, then definitely that means that we'll need to have much more work to be done with the civic actors. We also ask questions on the level of support they receive for their work, because again, the wellness, the understanding is that there are different roles that people play, organizations, your co-workers, your family. And here I wanted to know, so if Inuka is to do any interventions, who are part of the people that possibly they could tap into helping the actors to in terms of wellness. And here then we, as you can see, most of them are saying their work colleagues and other people doing human rights or civic work in Kenya are the ones that really support them in terms of the work. So possible is to think that those are the categories that really offer a lot of the emotional, physical support to the actors that we have, and we do then closely followed by close friends, and possibly then those are categories of people that would think that these are the support system for the actors. We do have a very low percentage in terms of other people doing human rights outside the country, because again, the thing or the narration here that we're saying is because you always seek out for the people who are very close to you, and the work colleagues or people within the space are the ones that are sought for support. But then, relatedly, as a follow-up, we asked how satisfied are they with the level of support, and you can see it's average. And here, part of the narration was that they are not guaranteed of the support, or it's one-off, or sometimes there's no end. There's no end to it. The workload continues being high, the stress levels continue. So what you get is one-off, and possibly that's part of the gap that Inuka is trying to fill with the hubs on the wellness, so that we can have this support being satisfactory or totally satisfactory, and the individuals would either be able to manage their wellness or to have a much better support systems. Again, this one corresponds to the earlier one. We're asking if they receive well-being support from fellow HRPs and other players, and they said yes, a majority of them, which answers to the question of where do they get their support in terms of wellness from. We also wanted to test if they have access to good and reliable information and resource of mental wellness. And as you can see, a high percentage, 62%, they said they don't. So that also means that there's still much more work to be done in terms of capacity building, sharing knowledge, sharing resources within this group. And again, just talk that this is just within the group that we talked to of the actors that are within the counties where where UNICA operates. But this also calls for more interventions, more sharing of even peer-to-peer sharing of knowledge and resources. Then also we asked what are the barriers? Why aren't you able to access better better resources for the emotional for the well-being? And lack of money was always something that was that came about, but you can also correspond in that the interest is very high. Only 18% said a lack of interest is a very significant barrier, but 82% really don't think that's a barrier. So the interest really to get support in terms of wellness is very high. And also the lack of technical support. And here it's because most of them were saying they don't know where to go to. They don't know whom to reach out to in terms of the technical support. So you either talk to a friend or a colleague on that. So apart from the lack of that support is also the leadership. Part of the discussion, though, also saying is even within those ones with the organizations, there's no focal point person to go for in terms of how do you seek help, and anyone would listen to you. And that then also will be some part of the thinking that in terms of wellness, we'll be able to support the individuals. Here we just wanted to find out if they have purposefully seen psychologists, a counselor. As you can see, it's only 24% who have seen a psychologist or a therapist psychologist at 8%. But that does not mean that there's no need. It just speaks the previous slide that most of them are saying they don't know where to go.
Sorry, Doctor. I hope you're almost winding up, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so and most of them were saying it's just because they don't know where to go, not that the need is not there. And again, this was something that would require further interrogation if in terms of taking medication, if it's really necessary or not, but we just wanted to corroborate that with the previous one in terms of seeing a therapist or a doctor to do that. So this one is among the second last one. So we wanted to know if organizations or personal life has changed because of pressures on civic space and related to wellness. And we had slightly over half of the respondents saying yes. And part of the reasons I said is they now take more rest. They take off over weekends. They're able to prioritize some of the things, and this is something that they were not doing. Others were saying that the organizations once in a while will take them through a training on wellness and how to manage their work levels, and that's how they have been able to change their lives within the last 3 years. So the recommendations that were proposed by the respondents is definitely capacity building sessions on mental illness. They also propose to have more regular briefing sessions if it's something that can be encouraged by individuals and also organizations to have this. Many of them talked about the need for having a trusted network of peer counselors. Again, this is because of some of the sensitive things within the space that we deal with. Like, for example, in sex workers, it's not everyone that will go to a provider and who will be providing that service and to be trusted. They also ask for small grants to do more of the trainings, even within their localities on the ground, and also possibly for UNICA to host an annual collective healing space and reflection for the civic actors, where they would celebrate, like how we have the Human Rights Award for defenders in the various countries. So let me end there, and we'll be happy to receive questions. Thank you, Salima.
Thank you, Dr. Ari. Sorry, because I know we are also pressed for time. Participants, we've heard from Uganda, we've heard from Kenya. I hope we've noted our questions, maybe point of clarification to our consultant who did the marvelous work that we're hearing. I don't know if Dr. Geoffrey was able to join. Daktari Geoffrey, you're here? Okay, then allow me to call Zainab from Tanzania. Alan, maybe if you can just accord her the rights, she'll be able to present also on behalf of Tanzania. Zainab, you're here? Karibu.
Asante Salima. Do I also have the rights to share the presentation? Couldn't.
Ala, you can enable. Thank you. Zainab, you okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Please, you have just 7 minutes just to give us the findings from Tanzania, Samahane.
Okay, because I'm just finding a way to share the document. Anyway, I can start presenting because I'm just struggling here to share the presentation.
Maybe you can share with me, I share with Alan. Then he can do, but the problem, you won't be, like at what juncture, it will be very problematic for him to help you with moving the screen. But Alan, I
Okay,
know.
let me just share so that we
Okay,
can proceed.
sure.
I've shared, Salim. Have you received it?
Not yet, Zainab.
I think
We can now, you can proceed. Thank you.
okay. Good morning, everyone. So these are wellness findings for the civil activist wellness baseline assessment, which was conducted last year with our consultant, Geoffrey Chamu. Unfortunately, he's not being able to connect us today for him to be able to present these findings to the team. We go through several areas. For Tanzania, there will be an overview, approach and methodology, respondents and demographic, limitations of the findings and key finding, lessons, conclusion, and recommendations. Okay, generally Tanzania, the total area of the country is around 945 square meters, and is one of the largest country in East Africa. Okay, since the presenter is not around, I'll skip some of the slides because I don't know what was in his mind when he was presenting them. So I'll just go straight to the study. The main objective of the study for Tanzania was to identify civil activists in 5 categories. We were having activists, veteran, catalysts, thinkers, and supporters. So these are the people who were contributed to the civil space. We identified the factors contributing, the identified factors which contributed to the well-being being affected. One of them was stress, burnout, psychosocial distress among civil actors. We had an opportunity to engage 10 most influential civil activists in Tanzania who were based in Dar es Salaam for them to address their wellness needs. And also we provide recommendations which they gave us on how we can enhance their well-being as civil activists. So we had an inception, literature in the field and data processing. On the demographic, 31% of the civil activists which we interviewed were women, and 15 were males, and those who age above 65. So this is a group of veterans. Between 40 and 60 years, we had 23%, and they were all males. And below 40, we had 31%, and also those are males. So from this data, you can see like we don't have young female upcoming activists in this area, and maybe this is we need to do further studies to know why women don't want to come out as civil activists, and we just have 31% who are above 65 years of age. So this is a concern for the upcoming females in the civil space as activists. And we had an interview, we had a chat with these civil activists to know the knowledge, the understanding on wellness. And 30% of them, they say they have a partial knowledge on wellness. 30% they provided of the overview knowledge of the wellness. 0% have a comprehensive knowledge, and 40% of them, they have a very limited knowledge on wellness. So our wellness was divided into few categories. First one was safety and security. And in this one, there were intimidation, detention, kidnaps, limited mobility, limited communication of immediate and threats. On emotional wellness, this one actually they go together with financial, because most of them they were affected financially because of the same certain restriction while they were executing their work as civil activists. On emotional wellness, some of them they say they lost the clients and immediate co-workers, and even some of them they say they once they chose the path of being civil activists, they were isolated, they lose friends, people don't want to associate with them. So it's really affected them there emotionally and financially, because some of them lose clients because they become civil activists. Lack of projects, livelihood to sustain their lives after retirement. That was another emotional and financial illness being affected. Difficulty in securing job from public domains is like they've been blacklisted. So wherever they go and to look for job, they cannot find job for them being civil activists, and also professional ban. We've witnessed some of the civil activists which we interviewed. They've been banned, and one of them actually was banned just a few months after having an interview with us. He's an advocate, and now he cannot practice. His license has been revoked because he's a civil activist. Social wellness, being civil activists, they raise one of the issue like being abandoned by family and relatives, character assassination, intimidation of family members by state organs, limited in social gatherings, children being abscond from studies by coming from the family which is involved with activism, or as the way people see, once you're an activist, you're against the government and the current regime. So this has affected even the family. And on intellectual wellness, limited space for stimulating the intellectual faculties. And this actually is one of the major concerns, because majority of people we interviewed, the people who are most influential in this country are civil activists, and they're people who are more intellect and they have a lot to share, but they're limited to share. So them just being there without sharing their knowledge has really affected them. Lack of time management to activate mental health is another problem. Limited support from professional networks. This also was one of the concerns. On the physical wellness, they lack medical and health insurance cover since they're financially incapacitated, hence they cannot even take care of themselves. So they lack access to good medical services, and when you look at their age, it's an age where they need access of medical services. Limited time for physical exercise, this was one of the problem. Limited diet, it's another issue, and also subjected to torture and harassment due to their movements. On spiritual wellness, limited time for congregations, being labeled to confrontational and evil person against the government. And during our conversation, this is an area whereby majority even wanted to request the government to take civil activists as to recognize them as the movement which want good interest for the country, and not label them as bad people who criticize the government, who are against any government move. So this also is one of the issues, and some of the civil activists, they confess like them being spiritually connected has given them more strength and courage and faith to go on with their movement. So them having spiritual wellness has enabled them
Zainab,
to become more resilient. Yes.
Zainab,
So the needs, yes, Salama.
I think we lost you at some point. Are you here?
Yes, I'm around. Can you hear me?
Zainab, if
Yes.
you can confirm.
We can
Yes,
hear her.
we can hear. We didn't lose her. It must be a network.
Thank you.
Check your network.
Maybe it's from my end. Thank you.
Okay, some of the needs which were identified by most of the civil activists were some of the security challenges. During the interview, one of the civil activists, we interviewed him while he was in protection. He was in another country because he was threatened his life, so he has to evacuate the country with his family. So we interviewed him while he's in neighboring countries. So security challenges is one of the concerns. Spiritual challenges, social challenges, emotional challenges, and financial challenges. So you can see 85% of the civil activists, they say that for them, financial challenges is major because they cannot practice, they cannot do anything, they cannot do businesses because their businesses are banned, they cannot be employed and all that. So 85% of them, they have been affected financially and even socially. 85% of them, they say they lose friends. They lose very close people who are dear to them because they're afraid to associate with them. So that is also an area where there's a bigger challenge, and also we can see on the security challenges. Like one of them, when we were interviewed, was in exile, was seeking protection from another country, and also of recent, one of them, he has been banned to practice. So and he has been threatened because he criticized the government. So that's another challenge. The future activism in Tanzania. This is the question where we ask them, how do they see the future activism in Tanzania? Are they going to be free to speak up for the interests of the Tanzanians? Or are they see more threat for them not to speak or not to? And this actually we related to the number of women participating in the activism. And when you look at that, is like still there's some people who are ready to come up and for the interests of the country, but still there's some who are afraid, like, no, my family will be at risk, even myself. And when we interview them, majority of them, they were ready to come forward as activists for the interest of the countries. The only concern they have is for their family. They don't want their family to be part of this, but unfortunately, there are two things which you cannot separate. So they see 15% of them, they see maybe there will be a bright future for them to continue with the movement as a civil activist. And 85% say, nah, the future is not promising. Still, there's a lot of work to be done. We as civil activists, we're doing something good for the country, for the citizens. So the government need to recognize us and take the positive things out of us and don't take us as critics who have a bad interest for the country. Risk and mission, some of the risk.
How
Which
might
they,
be also planning to wind up, yeah? We're so
yes,
pressed
yes.
time. Okay,
Some of
shukran.
the risks are physical harm, alienation from the society, job insecurity, prosecution, and mitigation of the risk. Also, we have recommended, they have recommended themselves when they were giving us the risk. They came up with a mitigation on certain areas like effective communication and shaping the narrative by civil actors, strengthening of mechanism to use law as a prosecution measure, use court process to expose infiltration and search for justice, support, they're looking for economical support, information on security and due diligence training. They require training on how they can learn how to become more security and safe alert so that they can be safe and their family. And also financial literacy. They appreciate if they can have that trainings on how they can enhance how to manage the little finances they have, and also network them and engage them with entrepreneurial skills, livelihood, and financial. And also they said about continuing advocacy for amendments, some of the laws in the country which needs to be amended. So advocacy for law reforms is something which needs to be enhanced. So some of the core areas whereby we saw problems, it's a protection, whereby now this can be linked with HRDs, physical, encouraging them to do physical activities, and this can be linked with rehabs, recreational centers, and having comprehensive packages for medical insurance and referral mechanism. And also intellectual, this one they were like establishing a database for mentorship and coaching between veteran mentors and catalysts, because from the data we saw there is a gap. So how can these veterans transfer the knowledge to the upcoming ones? So they saw there is a need of establishing either virtual platform or any other platform whereby they can transfer the knowledge to the upcoming civil activists. On the financial, they recommend provide financial literacy on capital investment, attach them with professional organization for advancing their professional and increase their finances, emergence fund for family support, establish joint law firms for PIL activists, and also provide immediate support when they have problems. So we went further and look at the regional, international, national, and sub-region cooperations. Some of the institutions we can partner with, we can work together towards supporting civil activists in East Africa, and we have identified some few whereby in regional we have South African Human Rights Defender Collaboration, Pan-African Lawyers Union, and Al Jazeera, International Commonwealth Lawyers, European Union, Voice of America, sub-region. We have a Center for Strategic Litigations. And at the national level, there is a NUCTA Tanzania Episcopal Conference, Sauti ya Wananchi, THRDC, IJA, Tanzania Student Networks, and other clubhouse platforms. Recommendations for veterans, they recommended to give them unrestricted priority to apply for any consultant within our networks, and to provide comprehensive package for health cover, and also to establish social wellness club for them to be able to interact with the fellow veterans who are civil activists. Virtual prayer club also for them, that's what they recommended. Then for civil catalysts, provide mentorship and coaching, training on cyber security is very crucial for them, provide comprehensive cover also. And I think that is it for civil activists. I went so fast because I just got the presentation and presented, but at least I believe you guys have get something out of it. Thank you a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Zainab, for the presentation. And maybe even for our participants, all these resources shall be shared into our website where you can have access and introspect further. Allow me now to invite Jared to take us to the next segment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick, Sarah, and Zainab for sharing the findings on behalf or for the different countries. Right now, I want to invite Oyoko to do a brief synthesis and grounding to some of the emerging issues which are cross-cutting in reference to civic actors. Kindly, Oyoko, I'll just give you 5 minutes. In the meantime, participants, we appreciate that we have to appreciate that you're many. Kindly chat your questions because you're going to give a few participants to ask questions. Oyoko, kindly take it off.
Thank you very much, Jared, for this. So I think first of all is to commend Inuka and Ford Foundation for this initiative. As Salima mentioned earlier, some of us who've been in this space, the civic actor space for a long time, issues around wellness have never been a priority, especially in the earlier years. And so I think this is a very opportune initiative by those who've initiated this process. Because I've been told I only have five minutes. I think one thing that's is coming out is from listening to all the research findings and recommendations from the various countries is the need to invest in deliberate investments in issues of wellness and well-being of civic actors. So I think that's I think a paradigm shift that we've had in the past few years. I think with this initiative, there'll be more concerted and deliberate efforts to ground issues around wellness and well-being in various aspects into our civic space. And I think a couple of things that I think I need to highlight. One is issues around the infrastructure around wellness within the civic actors sector. And I think that there have been, from my stand, quite a few initiatives. But I think with this, we begin to look at how do we create the infrastructure and the ecosystem that would more respond to the issues around wellness and well-being of civic actors in a more sustainable and long-term way, and deliver a consistent quality of care to those who need care. I'm biased towards mental health, so I'll speak more towards that. So I think that's critical. Secondly, also is issues around resourcing, well-being and wellness in the civic actor space. I think and if you look, when I was hearing from the Ugandan representation, I think that's one of the things that came out. How do we raise the necessary resources, be it financial resources, be it technical resources, and the support systems that are needed. Then I think also something that's I think for me would be critical from where I stand, issues around stigma reduction, especially on mental health. There's a lot of stigma still, I think, in our context, and I think I'm assuming this will apply across all the 3 countries participating in this research and project. So I think and stigma reduces help seeking and health accepting behavior. So people don't come out, people don't seek the kind of help and assistance they need if they're having mental health challenges because of stigma. It also impacts on promotion of wellness and mental health. And I hope also one of the aspects that I think this initiative would look at is in terms of how do we what interventions are needed in terms of promotion and preventative mental health and wellness, so that then we're not just responding to crisis, but also encouraging civic actors to adopt behaviors and practices that promote their mental health, and organizations also to create the necessary conditions so that their staff and the people they work with, associates, are able to practice wellness as an ongoing and entrenched practice. And also,
Hello,
this also goes
Ayoko.
to, hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
We can
you
hear
hear
you. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh yeah, there was I had somebody speak there. So I think when Salima was speaking at the beginning, and she spoke about some of the, I think the low hanging fruits that I think this initiative might I think are proposing, and I fully concur with that. She talked about screening tools, and I think this is very critical for identifying at an early stage, those who might need some sort of intervention in terms of wellness and well-being, and also issues around developing guidelines for wellness. I think that's critical, so that in terms of wellness and wellness.
Participants, I'm not seeing any hand up, so I'm going to read a question. No, there is actually a comment on this. So allow me to, Sarah, can you take the question from Solomon?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And in answer to Solomon, I guess the first start, because people will argue, and this I say knowing that I might get attacked. People may stand and say, people who are in prison serves them right. You understand? Because people are not very aware of what it means. I think for me, the starting point would be one, information. When society actors are thinking about the struggles they're having, they're not considering anyone else, because it's very individual, it's wellness, it's about me. So I think for me, the beginning is really, what's the information? What are the cases? Where can we get these numbers? What does it look like? Because remember, this study focused on NGOs. Now, for the NGO that you work with, that works with people in detention facilities, this is another aspect of wellness that we need to consider. And it's also probably an avenue for advocacy by NGOs. I think the starting point is to provide information. When you have information, that's power to proceed. With that information, you know who to go to, who to approach, what avenues to take, but also to start the conversation. Because, many people will look at it from a closed-off point of view, but what we need to do is open up their minds to understanding the challenges of people in general, not just society and wellness, but just to get the information. For me, that would be my starting point. What are we dealing with? And then when we know exactly what we're dealing with, we tailor to the information we have, we tailor to the context, to what is on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Patrick, kindly take the question from Salome Nduta and Mushai.
Thank you. The question from Salome is on the actor in exile. What mechanisms are available for them to support? I think this is, we didn't, at least for the Kenyan context, we didn't try to look at this, at the different people who've been exiled, what mechanisms are there to support. But I would speak from experience and the work that I do, that there are other people out there who are supporting actors who are in exile in terms of their wellness and all that. So I know of different institutions, either who give scholarships like universities for people just to go and rest and respite, which is part of wellness and all that. So I think for me, the thing would be, how do we connect them with the local partners that we have, the individual defenders, that we have and all that, because that connection then would enhance more. And if you maybe if you recall the support, when I asked the people that I talked to where they get most of the support, the international one was very low, and they said they don't get much of for those people who are doing civic work outside Kenya. So possibly that connection would be better enhanced, and it will make the mechanisms available even to those ones who would possibly go to exile. I think Pushai's question was specific strategies to help to grow the society's support into this. This was again, this I think is that it could be one of the interventions. I'm not sure what we can do to raise the society's ability to support the civic actors in terms of wellness, but trying to grow from the people that are partners within the civic act, within the civic actors, because those are the ones that came out at least in Kenya's case that they support a lot, and the family is not much. I know that disconnect is difficult because also part of the work we do as defenders, we do get family that are not supporting or not even agreeing with some of the stands that we take, and that weakens our mental well-being and all that. Possible is to think deeper about that. I really don't have any, I will not say that I have any solutions and all that, but it can be part of what as actors we can take up and develop strategies, create a more broad-based support from the society.
Thank you, Patrick. I think that question is something we need to ponder around as civic actors. And finally, we'll take Zainab, can you kindly take the question from what can the civil society increase their space and as well keep their wellness being going forward, considering the political dynamics that keep oppressing the NGO world? Zainab, are we together?
Yes, I'm around. Okay, I'm just rereading the question. What's considered?
I read it again.
Yes, please.
What can the civil society increase their space and as well keep their well-being going forward, considering the political dynamics that keep oppressing the NGO world, or rather the civil society?
I think this through establishment of different clubs and wellness spaces, whereby they can get support on different wellness categories. It will activate and stimulate the well-being and keep them positive and give them energy to go on as civil activists. So through these clubs, online spaces, whereby they'll get an opportunity to network and exchange their ideas, I think that will be the thing. But again, we have some civil activists here. Maybe we can also give them an opportunity, maybe one or two, for them to tell us exactly what they think, because I'm talking on their behalf, but I think they can say themselves what they think will be better for them.
Thank you very much. And finally, Flugens, can you assist us in responding to, from the statistics we have discussed here, we have seen issues on gender parity, that more male participating in research. How can we resolve, can this be resolved through wellness?
Yeah, this can be resolved by bringing awareness to the people, so that people can be aware that there is existence of this wellness program, so that can be part of it. And sometimes we can create safe space where people will be open for them to share their story or to share what they are going through. Otherwise, if they are not assured of being the safe space where they can be comfortable and share whatever they are going through, can be a serious challenge. And sometimes people can think they can be persecuted out of whatever they haven't shared. So creating safe space for them and making them comfortable to share their story can be one of the best options to bring more women on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. I want to read a comment from Steve Biko. It says, mine is a comment in regards to sustainability. HRD organizations need more capacity on resource generation now that funding is really dwindling. Bearing in mind that most of the international funders are also trying to align with the government and getting good books. I think that is a comment which has been well noted. And again, I want to also capture some of the questions which came earlier. I think that is Benizar who asked about the standardization of the tools in terms of different countries. But then that one, we are going to share the report. We are going to share the report with all those ethics of doing research. So allow me to thank everyone, the participants, for your patience and for the questions. And I want to thank the panelists for their contribution, their discussions. I want to invite Kawive to then go ahead and invite, yes, Kawive, to invite Jessica on.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the contributions and the very solid presentations. I hope all of you can hear me better now, considering the first time it wasn't very clear. Allow me, therefore, thank you. Allow me, therefore, to invite the Regional Director of the Ford Foundation Office in Eastern Africa, which office has supported this study and is supporting the Weaving Resilience Initiative, to officially make remarks on insights in integrating wellness in the CSO spaces, and to officially launch the report. Thank you very much, Jessica, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Kawive, and it's still a good morning. I think it's before noon, so good morning to all of you. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. I have a raging wind around my office, so hopefully it's not interfering with the sound. So firstly, just a pleasure to be here. And as Kawive had mentioned, the Ford Foundation actually, it was in the COVID pandemic, which also, as you know, was also a moment of reckoning around racial justice in the US and beyond. The Ford Foundation actually decided that this was a time that required extraordinary measures because there was extraordinary mobilization and extraordinary need globally. And so launched the social bond, which was basically taking $1 billion from borrowing $1 billion from the capital markets to create a fund that could then support activism, racial justice in the United States, and then globally to create this Weaving Resilience Initiative, which was a one-time 3-year commitment to help supercharge some of the areas of resilience we knew were necessary to really continue to meet the moment and meet the challenges of justice. And so the wellness and thinking about emotional well-being as resilience is one of those domains. So I wanted to just reflect a little bit on the report and the work, in some respects more from my vantage point as somebody who's been in movement work for a good 2 decades now, and as somebody who's worked a lot actually on building out African feminist approaches to thinking and reconceptualizing trauma and thinking very directly around how we create mechanisms, approaches, and even conceptual frameworks to work on wellness that make sense in our environments, in the political history that we have, and with conceptualizations of the self, which is something I think we need to think about when we look at this, because we talk a lot about Western talk therapy, but it also relies on a certain understanding of what it means to be a person, and what it means to be well. And again, these may vary in different environments. Salima had mentioned that, the question of well-being was not something that previous generations of activists thought a lot about. And I think we don't know the histories of wellness well enough actually to fully say, because I'll go into some of the examples of where they did. But, there were a few reasons for that. And one of them was sort of made clear when I asked the question to a group of older anti-apartheid activist women who were very active in the anti-apartheid struggle, including some of them in MK, and asked the question of, did you guys think about wellness? And the response of one of the older women was to say, of course we didn't. We were involved in the struggle because we had to be. There was no other thing to do, right? There was no other thing to do. And so I think it's interesting to look at this question now when it's a slightly different nature of activism that's more institutionalized, that's in organizations, that has a slightly different imagination to it, and to think about how we think about the work that we're doing and also the needs of wellness there. Just a quick reflection on some of the findings of the report and some of the broader conceptualization. So it's actually very notable that a lot of the need comes up as questions of financial resilience. And I think it's interesting when you're thinking about wellness for paid employees of organizations or people who are contracted by organizations to work in questions of human rights and social justice. Some of the questions arise not necessarily from persecution or from what happens when you challenge power, but just literally by working in stressful working conditions, right? Which are partly created by the environment that we're in, but also just the nature of 21st century work, which is nonstop, which is around the clock because we all have phones and access to internet and technology, and which are also reliant on a broader economy that asks us to constantly be working. And I do wonder if then some of these conversations actually need to be had as a question of organizational policy. So what are the ways that we're thinking about being good employers, right? What are the ways that we're thinking about labor rights, including in NGOs, and what it looks like to actually model decent work and decent work conditions, which is a slightly different conversation in a way, but perhaps needs to happen. And there, I think a strong case can be made. Many people mentioned that donors tend to not support core costs, which is something that, the Ford Foundation with its grantees, for example, has really tried to address through principles of true cost recovery, also trying to give wherever possible core and flexible support. And I think a case can be made for if we're going to be, good employers, we actually have to have policies that sufficiently cover for the basics of occupational well-being, right? That sufficiently cover for health and that pay sufficient salaries. And I think an argument can be made if we're looking at, again, a highly formalized NGO environment. However, I do also want to draw attention to the fact that a lot of social justice does not happen in offices. And we really need to pay attention to the fact that movement actors, again, some of whom may work in organizations, but ultimately do a lot of their activism outside of them, that also needs to be attended to. So we have to think about, like I said, workplace well-being, but if we're thinking about social justice and well-being, we have to take into account the questions of actors who are outside of formal organizations, who are not employees, and how do we think about addressing wellness there? A lot of questions again came up about, as I said, about financial, the kind of economics of well-being. So one was about people not having adequate resources to continue their lives in a decent way. But there was also the question of the cost of well-being itself. And I have to say that, wellness is now in the hands of many people, including a wellness industry. And the wellness industry has a tendency to actually be quite expensive. And I do think that, so in some respects, money will always be a barrier, perhaps. And again, particularly if we're thinking about actors, like I said, who are in a broader movement, money will always be a question. So my question is this: what are the economically accessible methods that we can use? And here, I think we actually need to learn from activist traditions and activist culture around wellness of the past, perhaps even of the present. For example, I don't know if you know, but Kwame Nkrumah was actually a very dedicated yogi. Had a dedicated yoga practice. It's actually a common factor amongst many political prisoners who mastered the art of meditation and yoga, particularly people who are in solitary confinement, because they had to take control of their own bodies and their own minds in an environment that was taking away everything else. What's powerful about these practices, and again, it doesn't have to be yoga, it can be any other form of physical activity, is that you can do it without any money. All you need is just a space that's long enough for your body to stretch, right? And so how can we, how can we begin to tap into some of these practices that are widely available? Actually, even yoga is, it's all on YouTube. You don't even have to go to a class. But we also have in our environments different kinds of physical practices, again, that we can learn and encourage, as with meditation. And again, this has been something that has been part of political activist wellness practice for many generations. And again, it's something that we can think about. Another I always talk about is the movement of women living with HIV who remain my forever heroes. As we well know, I mean, my family's from Uganda. We went through those era of my mother's generation of what HIV meant for the community. And I know that, in the face of the fact that there wasn't really widespread access to antiretrovirals, there was deep social stigma, but people also had very serious health conditions in the form of HIV and sometimes full-blown AIDS. So the movement around living positively with HIV is something we also need to learn from. People really developed very accessible ways of dealing with very serious health issues, ways of dealing with nutritional needs, ways of dealing with mental health and emotional needs, of addressing social stigma in a way that didn't require a lot of money because nobody had money, right? It wasn't communities that had a lot of money. And as we know, in our environments, movements of people living with HIV were largely not middle class because a lot of middle class people were affected too much by the stigma and didn't come out. They weren't necessarily the leaders of the movements, right, publicly. So how do we think about that, right? And learn from movements of living with HIV, which were active in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, right? What were the ways that they organized? What were some of the tricks that they used, tips and tricks, the methodologies that they developed? There are also a whole range of approaches, traditional approaches to well-being. For one thing, we know across this African continent, the role of music and dance as a regenerative collective practice. People engage in music and dance collectively as a way of reorganizing the spirit. And if you look at a lot of contemporary holistic Western psychological traditions or healing traditions, they draw on the things that we do, right? The idea of convening in a circle, of joining voices in harmony, all of the sound therapy and music therapy, that's what we're doing. It's also a technology. It's actually a deep knowledge practice. Syncing in rhythm, right, is partly a way of reconstituting and coming back together in community to be in rhythm with each other. If you think about it, stress disorganizes us, distress disorganizes us, and it separates us from each other. Stigma disorganizes us. Political persecution disorganizes us. So what music and dance does is brings us back together, right? And like I said, these things are free. All you need is a space for it, and you can do it together. And we have it already. And again, so can we think about those as practices we can honor and perhaps value as being legitimate technical approaches to addressing the question of well-being? We have a whole universe of traditional herbs that people use for stress relief, to address different ailments. Tika in Kenya has actually produced a whole book of Kenyan traditional medicine, herbal medicine. I come from a background of medical anthropology, I should have said so. I've sort of studied and thought about these questions for a while. And like I said, there's value in all of these things, right? There's deep knowledge in all of these things. And they're also accessible and people understand them. So why not think about using them? As we're looking at this question of economic access. As I try to wrap up here, I mean, one of the things I want to say is that as we look at well-being, we really have to move away from the idea that this is only a question of individual wellness. Actually, in the work that I did some time ago with a group, it was an initiative called AIR, but it was with a very diverse group of African practitioners, many of whom were clinical psychologists or counselors, and others who were doing very deep work around witness to human rights abuses, gendered human rights abuses, social justice documentation. And one of the things we collectively agreed was that part of the decolonization of emotional well-being and mental health is to repoliticize the questions. You have to have a political analysis, right, of the questions of well-being, because the root cause of distress is structural. It's ultimately structural, okay? We globally work in economies that prioritize product and productivity over people and over health, right? We live in policy environments globally that don't sufficiently provide for basic public goods, right? Almost nowhere in the world do you have, full access and proper access to education, to health, to housing, to clean water, to clean air. In our East African environment, we have a serious issue with policies around carcinogens. You know how many activists are dying of cancer, right? So why is that such a problem in East Africa? Why are so many people dying of cancer, right? Young, right? There isn't really very much restriction on the carcinogens in our fertilizers, in our food, in our plastics, etc. So again, we're exposed to a lot of environmental carcinogens and we're getting sick. And as we well know, we don't have sufficient cancer treatment availability in our environments either. So it's really, it's a serious challenge, and we know it because we've lost so many people, right, to it. So again, there's a policy question here around how we address some of the structural environments that are making us sick, okay? We also have, of course, social environments that actively discriminate, and be that on the basis of gender, of ability, of social class, HIV status, etc. So again, how do we think about this? Because we're talking about social justice. How do we understand the wellness as having structural roots and not just being, again, a question of, individual stresses, right? The structural stresses that we have to think about. I think that if we look at all of that, we can, build out again, keep making this a kind of rigorous picture and keep thinking about the kinds of interventions. To end, it struck me with Zainab's analysis there about how so many Tanzanian activists are not feeling hopeful, basically. And I think one of the things that has always propelled social justice movement and activism is hope. And so if we're not feeling hopeful, that's actually very serious. And we need to think a little bit about how we re-encourage ourselves to consider. And in that lies, I think, a return to the collective. We don't live as individuals. Nobody in this world lives as an individual. We live together. And we understand that too. One person's wellness ends up becoming a collective concern. So again, as we think about this, we have to think in collectives and not just about individual well-being. We have to think about collective well-being, collective wellness practices as well. We don't live alone, and the African knows that because that's just how the nature of family community is structured. It's the nature of the demands on you, but also we all know the toll that it takes on any of us, including an activist community. When somebody isn't well, it affects all of us. We all rally around it. We all try to address it. We all deal with its consequences. Wellness is never individual alone. This doesn't mean that individual needs shouldn't be taken care of, but we have to think about this as a question of collective care as well, and this is critical. So with that, I really want to thank Inuka for doing this work, for to all of the researchers that engaged this, sat and thought about it for a long time, to everybody that agreed to participate in the research as well, to really help us get a more empirical understanding about what the needs are. And we now have this report as a resource again to continue in terms of thinking about the what to do, because obviously there's a lot to do. There's a need and there's a lot to do, and some of the access needs are quite urgent. So again, how can we think creatively about what we can do, like I said, even with basic things that are directly available to us now, while we work on the larger questions of the structural, the resourcing, etc. With that, I wanted to launch the report, and I believe that I can share my screen. And I'm not totally sure how to do this virtually because I've actually never participated in a virtual launch, because can you guys clap and do things? I don't know. So let me see. Okay, here we go. So I hope you can see. So again, just to say a big congratulations again to Inuka for supporting this process, and to all of the researchers and everybody who's been involved in creating this resource. It's multi-page. It's got a lot of interesting, all of the data that we're looking at is here. And again, it helps to have an empirical basis, again, even to argue the case for the need for policy attention or the need for donor attention, the need for activist community attention to some of these factors. So again, as you can see, just scrolling through, there's a lot of great empirical information here, as well as analysis of what's important. So with this, I'd like to say again, Hongera, congratulations. I believe the link is going to be put into the chat, if it hasn't been already, for you to be able to access. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jessica, for thank you so much, Jessica, for the launch. And we also thank you for the support. Yes, in the launch, I'm sharing the link so that everyone can be able to get into it. So, and we thank all the participants who have been here. Now, allow me to introduce the new CEO at Inuka to say a word of thank you to all of us. Thank you. Welcome, Anne Nyambera.
Thank you so much. It's my great pleasure to close this workshop. It has been and launch. It has been an enlightening process for all of us. I believe that the roadmap has been set for Inuka to carry out the work that's ahead of us. We have received good and solid reports from the 3 countries that are participating in this process. We promise to look at the recommendations and do what we can as Inuka to actualize them. So on behalf of the organization, this is to thank everyone, especially Ford Foundation, for the support that you have given us in this process, and to wish us all a good rest of the day and a good future in the work that we're doing. Thank you very much.
Over to you, Salima and Derek.
Thank you, Kawive. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everybody. Gevuku, maybe you just give us the cake. Gevuku, Getahi. Let's celebrate these great milestones. I know they say it's a journey, but yeah, we all need to celebrate the small milestones. Gevuku, you're here?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the great insights. I think mine will just to ask you to join me in partaking this musical cake. Jessica Horn has talked about music, and music is what we are, especially when we are low or even when we are high. So, Nishuja Uganda we, Nishuja Uganda yetu, Nishuja Nishuja Tanzania we, Nishuja Tanzania yetu,
Nishuja.
Ndio maana
Tunasema mbele.
Ndio maana tunasema ni shujaa.
Ni shujaa Salima we.
Ni shujaa.
Shujaa Kaive wetu.
Ni shujaa.
Ni shujaa na everybody.
Ni shujaa.
Ni shujaa na wellness yetu.
Ni shujaa.
Na
ndio maana tunasema ni shujaa.
ndio maana
tunasema ni shujaa.
Ole yo.
Whoa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gevuku. Thank you, everybody, for taking time to be with us. Let's keep talking. Let's keep chatting. Have a